Welcome everyone to tonight's webinar, The Fight to End New Fracking Permits in Colorado. My name is Kevin Richardson. I'm with Halt to Harm Network, and I will be your host tonight. I'm really grateful that everyone took time to join us tonight. We have a very exciting event with a lot of really good information that's useful for folks both inside and outside of Colorado. So I'm excited to get started. I know folks are just settling in, so feel free to grab your cup of tea, a glass of water, and get started. We'll have a couple of minutes of introductions and do a quick activity to kind of figure out where people are coming from, and then we'll move into the main discussion for tonight's event. So tonight's speakers are Patricia Garcia-Nelson, who is the designated representative for the Ballot Initiative and a member of Safe and Healthy Colorado. Also with us tonight is Micah Parkin, who is the co-founder and executive director of 350 Colorado and on the steering committee for Safe and Healthy Colorado. They'll be here tonight to speak about this exciting ballot initiative in Colorado to end new fracking permits and talk about the strategy, the human impacts, and answer your questions you may have about it. Real quick, before we jump into tonight's event, I do want to talk a little bit about Halt Harm Network. We're co-hosting this event, and just if you're not familiar with Halt Harm, and I think hopefully a lot of people on this call are, we're an online network that connects with, allows you to connect with advocates, organizers, and experts working to protect their communities from oil and gas. It's a great community of people from across the country who are fighting oil and gas harms, and we're a place to share resources and learn and to build power together. We provide campaign support, resources, access to issue and legal expertise, as well as webinar hosting like this. If any of y'all are interested in joining, please join our online network. I'll drop the link in the chat in a little bit, but it's right there, network.halttoharmnet. And if you have any questions or would like to co-host a webinar like this, reach out to me. I'm Kevin at halttoharm.net, and I'm easily accessible. Cool, tonight's agenda. Right now we're going through the welcomes, and we'll do a short welcome activity in just 1 minute. After that, we're going to do a short campaign video that's about 8 minutes long. It's going to kind of go through the ins and outs of the Ballot Initiative, and Micah Parkin from 350 Colorado and Safe and Healthy Colorado will introduce and share that with us in just a moment. After that, we're going to go into an in-depth moderated discussion with Patricia Garcia-Nelson and Micah Parkin, where we're going to talk about the Ballot Initiative, the strategy, the impacts, why they chose this route, and what's coming up next. After that, we're going to have some calls to action for y'all to follow the campaign and support and share it with others. And then we'll move into a Q&A at the end. As always, feel free to drop your questions in the chat and comments in the chat as we go along. We'll have points where you can stop and throw in questions or throw in your reflections, but I always encourage folks to use the chat as widely as possible. So with that, we're going to find out where everyone is coming from tonight and do a quick map activity. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and load up our map activity. All right, here we go. So if you go ahead and in the chat, drop your location, usually by city and state or county and state, it'll populate on the map. So go ahead and tell us where you're coming from tonight, and we'll get a good view of where folks in the state are by dropping it, where folks in the country are. So by dropping in the chat. I see we got a good amount of folks from Colorado, which makes a lot of sense. Some from New York, again, also makes sense, dealing with a lot of fracking issues in New York. Right down in the South, Georgia, looks like Ohio as well. Yeah, coming from the Northeast, the Pennsylvania, kind of New York, Massachusetts area, folks in Philadelphia, other states. Yeah, a big mix of people coming in from Colorado. Some more from the Southeast. One from Georgia, from the Midwest. Cool. Yeah, again, if you're just joining us, drop your location in the chat and it'll pop up on this map and we'll kind of see where folks are coming from. Yeah, it's exciting to see people both coming from Colorado and from the Northeast, where I think there's a lot of similar issues and it's a good opportunity for cross-learning across those different regions. Leave this up for about 10 more seconds, and anyone else who hasn't dropped their location can go ahead and do that in the chat. Cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and take a screenshot of this, and then I'm going to share it with the recording later. Cool. Thank you. So with that, we're going to get started with the main part of our event. Again, this is being recorded, so we'll share the recording with everyone afterwards, and I encourage you to share that recording with anyone who couldn't make it. There will be a lot of useful information for folks in other states who are interested in the idea of a ballot initiative as a way of addressing fracking issues in their state, as well as similar related issues around oil and gas pollution. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Micah Parkin from 350 Colorado and Safe and Healthy Colorado to show us the video.
Great. Thank you so much, Kevin. Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, looks good.
All right, great.
At a house party.
And I'll just pause to say this is a video that we're showing at the house parties that different people are hosting around the state to help raise money and awareness about the ballot initiative effort. So that's why it's welcome to our house party.
Safe and Healthy Colorado is a grassroots coalition of Coloradans working toward a safer, healthier future. To protect the health and safety of our families and future generations, we're committed to move beyond oil and gas extraction via fracking to clean energy. We are organizing to place a measure on the 2024 statewide ballot to phase out new oil and gas permits that use fracking by 2030. The Ballot Initiative reduces fracking first in disproportionately impacted communities and promotes a just transition for workers and communities to a clean, renewable energy future. Here's a quick agenda for tonight's video. Why is fracking a problem? Why a statewide ballot initiative? Who is supporting? What's next and how can I help? Time for questions and answers. Fracking, the main method of oil and gas extraction in Colorado, poisons our communities with toxic chemicals in the air and water. Benzene is just one of the carcinogens fracking releases. It has no safe level of exposure for humans and results in serious health impacts, including cancer and blood disorders. Fracking also increases ground-level ozone levels, raising people's risk of asthma and other respiratory illnesses. The oil and gas industry is the #1 source of pollutants that create ozone or smog. Fracking is encroaching into residential areas with well pads near houses and schools. Horizontal wells run for miles underneath people's properties. Environmental justice issues are made glaringly obvious when it comes to oil and gas extraction in Colorado, too. Fracking is often sited near low-income and communities of color, further burdening historically marginalized communities with pollution that harms their health, finances, and well-being, e.g., increasing work and school absences due to illness. Fracking involves multiple issues related to water as well. Fracking pollutes water and wastes it. Each well consumes 5 to 20 million gallons of fresh water, which is made so toxic it is typically removed from the water cycle into deep injection wells that can cause earthquakes. The oil and gas industry is the #1 source of Colorado's greenhouse gas emissions. Colorado is 5th and 8th in the U.S. for oil and gas production respectively, contributing significantly to the climate crisis. The majority of oil and gas extracted here is exported out of state. Fracking emits about 60% of Colorado's methane, a greenhouse gas that is 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Climate scientists worldwide say we must stop bringing new fossil fuels online to keep global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Pollution emitted by oil and gas operations in Colorado will cause well over $13 billion in damages between 2020 and 2030. The oil and gas industry contributes a small fraction of our state's diverse economy, about 3.3% of GDP, and an even smaller percentage of jobs, about 0.7%. Fracking lowers property values too. The industry has, so far, only had 1 year of positive cash flow in aggregate, and investors are wising up. Taxpayers face a $7 billion liability of well closures and cleanups as companies go bankrupt. So why a statewide ballot initiative? As you can see, fracking harms Coloradans in so many ways, and there's so much more we haven't covered. Along with the issues we did cover, here are some additional reasons we're working on a statewide ballot initiative to phase out fracking. First, political failures. Governor Polis promised bold climate action, but more than 5,600 oil and gas wells have been permitted since he took office. 4 years after declaring that the oil and gas wars are over, with the passage of SB 19-181, fracking is still harming our communities. The ECMC continues to permit about 1,000 new wells every year, and it's a greater source of greenhouse gas emissions than all other sources combined when the emissions from exported oil and gas are considered. Even with a supermajority in the legislature, we've seen few substantial changes to the manner and rate at which the oil and gas industry has been allowed to operate. Reason number 2, self-determination. Statewide ballot initiatives are the most powerful tool at our disposal to create meaningful change. They give us the opportunity to enact new laws and protections and empower voters to overcome lobbying and strong financial influence that special interests use to control our political systems. Movement building. A successful statewide ballot initiative is our greatest hope to transform Colorado from one of the nation's largest greenhouse gas polluters to a global leader in the transition away from fossil fuels and toward a just, thriving, renewable energy future. A win here could potentially be the biggest victory to date for the climate movement and inspire people everywhere to follow our lead. What would this ballot initiative do? This initiative would ensure that after 2030, no new permits for drilling would be approved. It would require the ECMC to make rules before 2026 to begin the process of gradually reducing the number of new permits given each year. It would require the ECMC to prioritize reducing or eliminating new permits in disproportionately impacted communities first. Once the new permitting is stopped, oil and gas production in our state would naturally decline over time as the existing oil and gas wells run dry. This would make room for a clean energy economy to flourish. It would gradually eliminate the greenhouse gas emissions and other pollution caused by burning the oil and gas Colorado produces. It would not ruin our state's economy. According to a January 2023 report by the Colorado Fiscal Institute, oil and gas make up only about 3.3% of the economy and less than 1% of the workforce. Over the past 4 years, we've seen the economy growing even while the oil and gas portion of the economy has been declining. Who's supporting the ballot initiative? Currently, we have 140 plus endorsements from groups, current and former elected officials, community and business leaders, and more. Go to safeandhealthyco.org/ballot-endorsements to see all of our endorsers. Here's a condensed timeline of the ballot initiative effort. Phase 1, January 2023 through February 2024, develop and defend language. Phase 2, February through August 2024. Gather 200,000 signatures on petitions to place the measure on the 2024 ballot. Phase 3, August 5th through November 5th, 2024. Get out the yes vote. Ongoing efforts throughout the campaign include raising money, educating the public, and gathering support in the form of endorsements, pledges to sign, and donations. Currently, we're in Phase 1, identifying the most effective messaging and language for a ballot title to appeal to voters. We have 2 criteria for success. We only want to proceed if we have a strong likelihood of success, and that means sufficient public support and raising $1.5 million by this December to hire a professional signature gathering firm to ensure we can make the ballot. This will be challenging. The oil and gas industry is wealthy and powerful, but when we work together, people power is stronger. We can do hard things together, and we know it's worth it to try in order to protect our land, air, water, climate, and our children's futures. Before we wrap up with the Q&A section, here are some ways you can help out with the ballot initiative effort. Pledging to sign the petition and sharing the pledge to sign with your network, volunteering time and skills, donating or pledging money. We're looking to raise about $80,000 now, as well as pledges towards our $1.5 million goal to hire a signature gathering firm when the time comes. Thank you for listening. We have time for questions and answers now, and on the next screen, you'll see some QR codes which will direct you to pages where you can help out with the Safe and Healthy Colorado Phase Out Fracking Ballot Initiative campaign. Thanks so much for your support.
Thank you so much for sharing that video. We're going to move into a moderated discussion in just a moment. Before we do, I wanted to take a moment and reflect on the video and give everyone a chance to give us your reflections or any questions you have from the video in the chat. we'll have a Q&A at the end and we can address the questions there. But I'd love to hear what people thought about the initiative and the framing of it, any reflections you have on it. I will say that I think that was an excellent overview of the context for the ballot initiative, the strategy, and the timeline. And it gave us a good sense of what's at stake, especially with raising money for it. So I think it was a good piece to share. If any folks have any reflections or reactions to the video, please just drop them in the chat, and we'll save them and also post them on the recording that we send out. Yeah, Evan put in the chat that a major reason to use the ballot initiative is Governor Polis can't veto them, unlike legislation, which is a good point. So something they can't directly overturn. Yeah, Randy points out it seems idiotic to continue to permit oil and gas operations, but that's where the state is at, unfortunately, despite efforts to restrict them or institute new regulations on them. RK said, loved hearing those statistics about how low the workforce for gas and oil industry is. Yeah, that's a really helpful piece from that video. And we can put in the link to share around there, but understanding the real economic impact of oil and gas is not nearly as strong as the industry claims it is. Ron and Ellen said, as I've talked to people about the initiative, the one question that comes up time and time again is why aren't we calling for an end to all fracking by 2030? That's a great question we can address in Q&A. Ruth would like to hear some examples of negative health effects, which is something we're going to get into just now in the moderated discussion, so that's perfect. Joanne, people don't realize that oil and gas isn't used here. And there's another question for the Q&A. All right, great. Thank you for sharing your reactions. Continue to share your reactions and questions. And as we move along, please feel free to drop questions in the chat. We'll get to them at the Q&A part at the end. The calls to action you saw at the end of the video we'll share as well, so you have a chance to get those QR codes as well as those links if any of y'all are interested in supporting or continuing to follow the initiative. And we'll do that after the discussion. So right now we're going to chat with Micah and Patricia and get kind of more into depth about the context and the impacts of the initiative. So my first question, and let me go ahead and get everyone spotlighted so we can do this way. That's spotlight. So my first question is for Patricia, and that one is really, we got a good sense of kind of the meta impacts on the state, the health impacts from fracking and other issues like that. But I know your personal story comes from being a parent at the Bella Romero Academy and seeing those local health effects directly in your community and your family. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the human health impacts from fracking and how it's affecting neighborhoods in Colorado.
I mean, I know a lot of us on this call are familiar with the health impacts that we hear about, which is like the increased cases of asthma. But what I'm also seeing, which is starting to scare me, are the other. Long story short, I was in New Mexico. I work for Green Latinos now, and we were in New Mexico for one of our retreats, and we went to a community garden, and they had this beautiful, I wouldn't say beautiful, but they had this flyer, and it showed the health impacts of fracking on the physical body. And one of the things I never realized or that I hadn't really looked into, was there are benzene causes, one of the symptoms of benzene exposure is alopecia, or hair loss. And I have a 6-year-old nephew who in the last couple of years started developing, we knew the rashes were probably part of it, but now he is he's getting bald spots all over his head caused by alopecia. The doctors don't know what it's causing. And I always tell this story because it's so shocking to me. I was getting my nails done, and I was telling my nail tech about Bala Romero, and the woman next to me is like, "Oh, do you work there?" And I was like, "No, my son goes there." And she tells me her son goes there as well. And she said, ever since he started going there, he's lost like 25 pounds and he has all these stomach issues. And I said, "Let me guess, and nobody knows where your kid is sick." And she goes, "How do you know that?" And so I have, all these colloquial stories, all these things that I hear and I see day to day. But at the end of the day, what our biggest issue is that our personal stories and our lived experience doesn't seem to have as much weight as the lived as like the scientific data that we're collecting. And so right now what I'm also working on is I'm trying to find a public school of health or one of the universities to work with so that we can create some kind of like health study. And so we know that it would be really difficult to work with the kids because I mean it's the kids. I was like, I don't want universities talking to my kid either. So one of the things that we thought about was working with the teachers at the school and seeing if they would want to participate in a health study, because we hear all of these statistics and all of these, we see all these infographics showing what the health impacts are. But again, the government and all these other government agencies don't want to hear it unless they have scientific data. And so that, in itself contributes to another burden that community is left with when we know that all these things are hurting our communities. And now it's on us to also prove that it's happening to our communities. So the impacts on everyday people personally is exhausting. It's exhausting having to prove what you've experienced.
Yeah, it's incredible how the burden of proof has to be put on the communities who are fighting so hard. Thank you for sharing that. The other side of this too, in terms of not just the health impacts, but local opposition is, as we saw in the video, there's obviously been a lot of hope put into governor policy in the legislature, but that hasn't come through or hasn't borne out. So maybe you could talk a little bit too about some of the local government opposition that you've encountered that led you to take up this direct democracy ballot initiative approach, as well as some of the opposition from the oil and gas industry.
So when Micah asked me if I wanted to be the legal representative for this ballot initiative, I had to really think about it. I'm really good friends with Ann Lee and Susan Spiegel, which were the legal representatives for the ballot initiative last time when we ran Prop 112, and that was really difficult for them. And I was like, as I'm talking about it, I'm reliving that moment, and I feel like the fire in my chest. And I had a really rough year in 2021. I got COVID twice. In the span of 4 months, I had COVID. I got my wisdom teeth surgery. Then I had to get gallbladder surgery. And then I got COVID again. And that second time, I really thought I was going to die, but I didn't. And I always say that I didn't die for a reason. And ever since then, I want to be, I want this to come from the community that's being impacted. And when we did Prop 112 in 2018, it was personal. My family members were closing doors in my face. I was being followed. I got ran off the road. And, people were asking me why I was even trying to collect signatures in Greeley and Weld County. And my response was always like, because this is where I live. I've been told by elected officials in my city and my county that if I don't like it, I can leave. And, and the crazy thing is like, I was born and raised here, and I'm being told that by people that aren't even from here, which is crazy to me. But we experience harassment and bullying and intimidation tactics at every single level of government. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, I was at the Capitol for an ozone committee hearing, and there was an interaction with with one of the senators, Barbara Kirkmeyer, who was actually one of the county commissioners when the permits for Ballot were permitted. And she said that she was personally offended that we would call the story of Bella Romero racist, because she's the one that put this into place. And so there's dealing with the harassment, there's dealing with the intimidation tactics, but there's also the living with the disappointment. When Jared Polis was running for governor, he came to Bella. And he told me, when I'm governor, he said, if I were governor, this wouldn't happen. And fast forward a couple years later, when he's running for reelection, I'm asking him, for going on 7 years now to shut down the wells. And I told him, what's happening is wrong. And his response is, those permits were not issued when I was governor. And I told him, well, now we're experiencing emissions and leaks that are hurting our kids. And his response was, those emissions were legal. The governor told me that those emissions were legal. And the only thing I could say to him was, you of all people should know that just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right. And so for all of those reasons and many more is why I wanted to be a part of this project, because at this point, it is an act of survival. It's 100% an act of survival. And, at this point, I feel like I've experienced a lot that, what else could they do to me? What else could they say to me? What else could they do to me? They've already done it all. And so I think that even if we don't make it onto the ballot, it'll be really symbolic that one of the proponents is from, oil and gas country.
Yeah, that's absolutely infuriating, and I can understand the frustration at every single level. It's actually incredible. And I know folks in other states across the country have shared similar experiences, encountering that with politicians even who are kind of ostensibly on the side of protecting environment, health, and things like that. So thank you for sharing that. Micah, it's kind of a similar question from a different angle. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how the Ballot Initiative came together and how y'all decided to take this strategy.
Yeah. So a lot of us who are part of Safe and Healthy Colorado and this Ballot Initiative effort to phase out new fracking permits by 2030 have been part of the climate movement and the effort to stop fracking in Colorado and to rein it in the meantime for many years together. Many of us were part of the 2018 effort to create safer setbacks, increase safety zones between fracking and homes and schools. So many of us pivoted quite quickly after 2018 and started thinking, what next? What do we need to be doing? And we formed Safe and Healthy Colorado in an effort to move toward that. And meanwhile, the movement, many of our organizations who are part of the Safe and Healthy Colorado Coalition, and we at 350 Colorado, which, as you mentioned, I'm executive director of, are trying many other strategies too. We are, working to oppose fracking at the local level and helping support frontline communities who are opposing it. We're working at the state legislature, trying to move legislation. We intervene regularly at the regulatory agencies to try and do all we can to create the safest rules and to push back. We've joined lawsuits. But ultimately, what we keep finding is that the fossil fuel industry just holds far too much power and sway with most of our elected officials and their appointees. And so we keep seeing, like the video said, about 1,000 on average new fracking wells every single year. And here we are at a time, in the world where climate scientists are saying, from the UN, the International Panel on Climate Change, the International Energy Agency are all saying the same thing, which is we cannot continue to bring on new fossil fuels and expect to stay below that 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise that all the countries around the world agreed to strive toward at the Paris Climate Agreement. So, this effort is basically our most effective way, our most powerful tool that we have at our disposal for creating change. And it, when our leaders are not doing it for us, this is a way that we're blessed to have in Colorado. Not all states have a ballot initiative process. So I feel really lucky that we do have this tool that we, the people, can use the statewide ballot initiative tool to overcome that lobbying and the financial influence that the special interests are using to control our political systems and make law ourselves. Now, it doesn't mean that we won't have a huge uphill battle, because they still have a lot of money and hold a lot of sway, but at least we can turn it over to the voters to make a decision for themselves. And, you know, another piece of the pie here is too that I've never seen anything like a statewide ballot initiative that educates a huge number of people and mobilizes people and just contributes to movement building in such a big way as a ballot initiative effort. And so we really feel like a piece of the decision and the strategy too is that a win here at this point in history, when we know we need to start saying no to new fossil fuels, that hopefully it could start a bit of a ripple effect. You know, in other places we might start to see other efforts to start keeping fossil fuels in the ground too, that are led by the people if their leaders won't do it for them.
And what are some of the roadblocks you've run into or expect to run into with the ballot initiative that you're going to have to overcome through the campaign?
Well, one of the biggest is just money. It's very expensive to do a ballot initiative campaign. So trying to raise the money that we need to do it is probably our biggest challenge, I'd say. By the end of this year, we have to reach a goal of $1.5 million to be able to proceed with hiring a signature gathering firm to be able to gather the 200,000 plus signatures we need to place the measure on the statewide ballot for 2024. If we don't reach that goal by the end of December, we're not going to just quit. We'll keep going, but it just means we have to wait a little bit longer. And of course, we don't want to wait longer because this is, you know, the oil and gas industry here in Colorado. It's the biggest source of our greenhouse gas emissions by far. And when you include all those, you know, exported oil and gas especially, and it's our biggest source of our F-grade ozone air quality, severe air quality problem. And of course, it's a huge toxic burden on our communities. And so we want to move this as quickly as we can, and hopefully next year, if we can get to that goal. But it's a big, you know, that's a big number. So we'll see if we can get there. That I would say is our biggest challenge. And of course, also we're up against a very powerful, wealthy foe in the oil and gas industry who is going to undoubtedly spend a lot of money to try and convince people that they're critical to our economy, which, you know, as that video showed, the Colorado Fiscal Institute, their research showed it's just 3% of the economy, 0.7% of jobs, and it's costing us $1 billion on average every single year in harm. So, you know, but we have to have enough money to push back against some of that false narrative.
So it sounds like the big advantages involve really the potential for movement building in addition to achieving the actual goal of the ballot initiative, as well as educating the state. And the disadvantages is it's a huge effort, it requires a lot of money, and there's a big pushback against it. I know we have folks from places like Pennsylvania and other states where maybe something like this might be entertained. I wonder, what advice would you have for those folks? What should they know before engaging in a ballot initiative, since it's such a massive effort?
Well, a couple of things I would say is build as big of a coalition as possible, as early as possible, and keep building. Just keep working on it, because of course, you know, we'll never have the money of the fossil fuel industry, but we can build people power to you know, that can be even stronger. And also do try and raise as much money as you can, or wait until you have enough money, because what we saw in 2018 when we were really doing a ballot initiative on a shoestring budget is a lot of really awesome people burned themselves out pretty badly and had to take quite a break from activism. And we, you know, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So trying to raise the money so that we can hire the help that we need is really actually quite important, I think, for a ballot initiative effort.
Yeah, and another very good point about burnout. I know Patricia, you to that too, and you know, there's so many things that happen. This is just being involved in this on a daily basis is a big effort, and you get lots of pushback and things like that. I was wondering if maybe you could also talk a little bit about how you stay motivated and deal with these issues of burnout.
Did you say Patricia? Sorry.
Yeah, it's for Patricia. Well, both you can answer though, honestly.
Yeah, I turned off my camera because I'm getting a bit of a lag, but I mean, I have learned the hard way to take care of myself. Micah knows this year, especially, I have pulled back on a lot of things that I'm working on just to really, this is one of the projects that I'm definitely prioritizing. But just like most organizers and advocates, just take care of yourself. It's so important. Get sleep and take walks, and it's literally, I feel it's like the simple thing, but oftentimes it's the hardest thing to do, because we are experiencing a sense of urgency. I have a son, and so he has always been my motivation. And I know, Russell was one of the ones that said, I want to make sure that my kids know that I did everything that I could. And I've been working on things like this for going on 7 years now. And so I feel like I have a lot more tools, and I have a lot to do this as well. And so I just, want to shout out Micah for always being there to hold my hand and to have a shoulder to cry on, because that's important too, because I feel like there's an anxiety that we experience that most people don't even have. Like a lot of people don't even know this is going on. And so yeah, it's gonna be good.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know, yeah, taking care of yourself is so important in this movement. I think it's great when we have opportunities to come together and celebrate each other too, since there's so much bad news, but there's also a lot of good news. So I'm glad we can be here tonight to celebrate this campaign and the effort that all of you are putting into it. So my last question is really what's next for the campaign, and we can maybe use this as an opportunity to also share some calls to action for folks in the call to get involved.
So I guess Patricia, feel free to jump in on this one too. So yeah, we have this by the end of December goal of raising $1.5 million to move forward with signature gathering, with being able to contract the signature gathering firm. We're inviting people to, of course, give, share, host house parties, all the different things. I'll bring up a screen in just a minute that will show some of the ways people can help. And then beyond that, assuming we do raise the money that we need to proceed, we would move forward. We're also doing some raising funding to do some message testing to make sure that the messaging we're using is the most effective messaging with voters. So we're just about to move forward with that as well. And then assuming all's good, we have the money to move forward, then we would resubmit to the title board language and proceed with starting to signature gather probably February or March, basically. And then we have until August 5th to turn in the signatures. Then we would switch to the Get Out the Yes Vote campaign. Meanwhile, we would need to continue to raise funding for ad campaigns. Some folks were putting in the chat, ads and commercials are very expensive. They reach a lot of people. Michael Rose said, absolutely right. So, I mean, we'll never have all the money that the industry has to do all the commercials. And frankly, it's pretty obnoxious. I don't even think we'd want to, but we need to have at least enough money to push back, because so that people are hearing our side of the story at least a little bit. Maybe one ad per every 10 or 20 they do would be great. So we need to have money for that sort of thing, and we'll need volunteers, lots of volunteers, to help with hosting house parties or doing signature gathering, because you still, even with this paid signature gathering firm, you still want lots of volunteers, because everybody who is helping to gather signatures for free, or who is signing, who we can, contact right away and say, all right, we're ready to go to this location in your city and sign. All of that saves the campaign money, so that we don't have to spend that on a paid firm. So all of that, those are all some of the next steps that we'll be doing. If we do not reach the $1.5 million goal, our bare minimum is 1.1 million to move forward. If we don't reach that, then, as I said earlier, we're not going to quit. We're just going to have to push it off and keep building toward the next opportunity to place it on the ballot, the statewide ballot, which would actually be 2026 because you can only do fiscal matters in odd number of years. So we would have to wait 2 years. We don't want to wait because, of course, we're in a climate crisis and an air quality crisis. So we really hope we can raise the money, but that's what we'll do if we can't. So yeah, let me go to my screen really quickly that has some of the ways people can support. While Patricia, did you have any questions? Any next steps or anything you wanted to share with people?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think that the whole world is that, like, or like, you know, regardless of there and every actor is somehow related or involved with other actor. That's, you know, Kevin Bacon. And so, you know, everybody knows someone in Colorado. So if you live in Colorado or you have friends or you have an aunt that lives in Colorado, I mean, I don't want to sound like pyramid schemey, but definitely, you know, tell your friends to tell their friends to tell their friends, because we were so close to get you know, our ballot initiative passed last time that I feel now we were so close. Like we're going to do well this year, and it's going to be great, and we're going to pass this because we need to pass it.
Yes, we do.
Can y'all see my screen okay?
Yep, looks good.
Great. And hopefully these QR codes will work for everybody. If you do QR codes on your phone, you can just do that QR code there to pledge to sign the petition. So if you live in Colorado, then please, please, please go ahead and pledge to sign right now. That QR code will take you to a little form where you can say, yes, I will sign that petition to help place it on the statewide ballot. And that way, again, as I was saying, every signature we don't have to pay for, that we can just contact you and say, great, you know, go to this location and sign, we're ready. That'll help us a lot. And then sharing that pledge to sign with your network. And so that second QR code down there, it will take you to an outreach toolkit. And that toolkit has it has sample social media posts that you can share with your friends and say, hey, this is really important, please sign to phase out fracking by 2030. Or it also has sample emails and other stuff that you can share that'll really, really help us to get the word out far and fast. So if y'all can do that, we would be so grateful. And then here are 3 other ways. At the top, hopefully this may be covered by the little bar at the top. Sorry if it is. The first bit up there at the top just says volunteer. If you live in Colorado, you can contact us at info@safeandhealthyco.org to let us know that you're willing to volunteer. We already have a lot of needs that all of you have talents that you could help us to address if you have a little bit of time to volunteer. And then, of course, the money part is so important right now. So you can either donate right now, today on Giving Tuesday, how appropriate. You can go ahead and do that middle QR code there in the middle of the screen to go ahead and make a donation online. And then at the bottom right, if you would like to, you can also make a financial pledge toward that $1.5 million goal. So the middle one, again, on the middle of the page, is if you want to just go ahead and give right now, which is awesome. And then if you would prefer, or if you want to also make a stretch goal, even if you want to give now and then make a stretch goal toward our big, $1.5 million goal that we have to achieve by the end of the year, then you can use that bottom QR code and pledge whatever amount you feel like you can do. We're only going to call for those pledged funds if we reach the minimum of $1.1 million, which is our bare minimum by the end of the year to be able to proceed. So you will know that we won't contact you unless we know we can move forward. And then finally, I think Patricia shared it maybe Kevin shared it in the chat too. If for some of you, you can only make a donation to a 501c3, a tax exempt organization, you can also make a donation to 350 Colorado. We are raising money right now for the message testing, which is quite expensive. And so we're raising money for that. And also we're donating a lot of staff time toward helping to lead this measure. So if you can only do that because you have a family fund or family foundation or something like that that can only give to a C3 organization, you can go to 350colorado.org and make a donation there. And thank you all so much. We really appreciate it.
I'd like to jump in real quick and just mention, with the money that we've raised so far, we were able to defend the language that we got out of the Colorado Title Board, which included the word fracking, and we were immediately sued by the two opposers that were oil and gas people. And because it was from the Colorado Title Board, that challenge went directly to the Supreme Court of Colorado. And we were successful in being able to keep the word fracking in the title language. And so that's something that's also a little bit in the weeds, but I feel it's important to mention that, you know, we've been working on this and we've made some really huge progress, especially with that title language.
Time to move, Randy.
Thank you. And I shared the links in the chat, and as someone pointed out, they can't do QR codes on their phone, and all the links are in the chat to donate, make a financial pledge, make a pledge to sign, as well as I shared the toolkit in the chat that Micah mentioned, which has information on how to share on social media and so forth. We encourage everyone to share this information widely. People in Colorado can obviously pledge to sign the petition, but folks outside of Colorado can't sign the petition when it becomes live in 2024, but they can support it as long as they're within the US. So yeah, appreciate everyone taking time to listen to that. We're going to open it up now for Q&A. Please feel free to drop questions in the chat or raise your hand and come off mute and just turn your video on and you can ask a question live. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the spotlight while people are coming up with their questions. And there's also some questions in the chat from earlier, which I'll cycle back through. Please drop any questions you have for Micah and Patricia in the chat, or raise your hand and ask out loud. Ron and Ellen had a really good question. Can folks from out of state gather signatures? I assume he means in Colorado, like volunteer to help gather signatures.
You would have to come here and have an address here to be able to register as a signature gatherer. People do that kind of thing sometimes for big initiatives. They'll come into state and help, but you have to just register with a local address wherever you're staying. And people can give funding from anywhere in the United States. We can't take overseas funding, but we can, anybody in the US can give.
And like I said earlier, not to sound pyramid schemey, but if you know people in Colorado, you know, don't just tell them once, tell them at least 5 times until they finally come to you and say, I signed, you know, they collected my signature, or I donated, or I shared the post too, because it's the one-on-one conversations that really made the difference. Whether that's making phone calls or, you know, just talking to your neighbors. Like I said, a lot of people aren't aware of what's happening, and there's still a lot of education that we need to do. So yeah, call your friends and push them a little bit.
And I see Patricia asked Emic on the chat, do we raise money through grants? Yes, we have raised money through grants. Some grant makers can give to a C4 organization, and if they can, then definitely giving straight to Safe and Healthy Colorado is preferred. If they can only give to a 501c3, they can give to 350 Colorado, and we can use the funding toward the message testing and ads and our staff's leadership time as well. So we can definitely put money to work through 350 Colorado too, if there are grant makers who can only give to a C3.
There was also a question earlier from someone from Ohio saying, will anyone from the state have the right to rewrite the ballot initiative, which recently happened in Ohio? I guess that assumes like change the terms that are in the actual ballot initiative document.
That's an interesting question. I mean, I would
I
think,
don't think that's possible.
yeah, I think they would have to resubmit their own, go through the process themselves and resubmit their own another initiative, basically. And it could have, changed language, but they'd have to do it. They'd have to go through the process. Nobody can go in and change somebody else's, if that makes sense, directly. They'd have to just resubmit their own. And someone's asking the difference between a C3 and a C4 organization. Hi, Maria. It's so a 501c3 organization is one that is tax exempt, and a 501c4 organization like Safe and Healthy Colorado, ballot initiatives are not tax exempt. They're considered lobbying efforts, and so they can't be taken off your taxes, basically. And many foundations can only give to a C3 501c3 organization, tax deductible. That's the difference. And by the way, everybody, I just posted in the chat, we're also doing an event this Thursday evening, 6:30 Colorado time, with Bill McKibben, who's going to be joining us to talk about the measure. It'll be a little bit of a repeat of some of the content you learned tonight, but if anybody wants to join us, just wanted to make sure you know about that as well. And I have a RSVP link that you can sign up for that too, if you want to, if you're not bored of us after all this tonight. Love to see you there too.
See, Ryan, I see you have your hand up. Would you like to ask your question?
Hello.
Good
Yeah, can you
evening,
hear me?
Colorado.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Mountains, Rocky High Mountain.
Sorry.
Someone else is unmuted. You can go ahead, Ryan.
Okay. You were asking for Ryan, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, everybody. This is really exciting and intimidating at the same time. I'm curious. I guess I'm trying to orient my attitude toward the fundraising. It's a lot of money, and I would imagine most people here feel that way. The other big part of the process, admitting I'm not completely familiar with the petitioning and getting a ballot initiative established, the whole process. But yeah, I guess, what is the critical formal goal to get something on the ballot? Is it the signatures, and it's just that the money is a sort of tool to help gather signatures? Or is there actually some amount of money required to get to establish the ballot initiative? And I'm asking because I guess ultimately I'm trying to understand, like, what would be the possibility of gathering 200,000 signatures through volunteer hours alone?
Yeah, good questions, Ryan. To my knowledge, nothing's ever made the ballot without a paid signature gathering effort. The statewide ballot, of course, at the local level, you can manage it because it's only a couple thousand signatures, depending on the size of your city. But for statewide, right now, it's a percentage of voters, of registered voters. And right now, it means we have to gather 125,000 verified signatures, which you have to gather about 200,000 total to make sure you have at least that number of verifiable signatures, because so many people just make little errors or things go wrong and they have to throw out entire packets of signatures. And so anyway, to my knowledge, nothing's ever made the statewide ballot without a paid effort. And so there is no money. You don't have to give a bunch of money to the Secretary of State to have it placed on the ballot. Nothing like that. It's just the money is basically to hire help. And to hire good help costs a lot of money. And that was one of the things that the ballot initiative effort learned in 2018, is we didn't have enough money really to hire the top-notch most reputable firms. And we really got jacked around. I don't know how many people have heard the stories, but you can watch Brian Hedden's film Fracking the System, which Patricia Garcia-Nelson is featured prominently in, and it goes through all the shenanigans that happened in 2018. And we had the oil and gas industry was buying out signature gathering firms, and we had all sorts of crazy things happening, people trying to hold hostage 10,000 signatures and really wild stuff, awful stuff. I've never never seen so much just lack of I don't know, integrity in my life, I don't think, is that effort. So don't want to see it again. So therefore hire a reputable firm for sure. It would be another top recommendation, I'd say, for anybody considering doing this in their state. So yeah, the money is for a reputable firm.
Yeah, but we had
And then just to add a tiny bit to that, 1.1 million minimum is kind of our maximum last time. And like I said, we were on a shoestring budget. Like all of us were working for days and days and days and days for free. So it's a lot of work, but like I said, I don't know if y'all saw my messages. They might have a lot of money, but we have all the love, and you can't buy love. So yay.
And I was going to mention we Halt to Harm had an advanced screening of Fracking the System, the film that Micah mentioned, and I put a link to the website for Fracking the System. I don't know if it's available yet, but they're currently crowdfunding for release, and it's a wonderful film, very powerful. So I encourage you all to check that out and support it. There was one question earlier that was actually an interesting one that we didn't get to yet, but it was from Ron and Ellen saying that whenever they talk to folks about the initiative, one question that comes up a lot is why isn't the initiative to end all fracking by 2030? I thought that'd be an interesting thing to address.
And I'm going to share again to the fundraising appeals down there if anybody wants to give. So why not end all fracking? So I think what they mean probably is ending all oil and gas production, because it would stop all new fracking, which, you know, the fracking is usually done early in the process, primarily, although you can do refracts. But we basically are trying to walk a line here in Colorado, whereby we're trying to pick something like that has the best chance of actually passing. And, you know, if we were to say, let's ban all fracking tomorrow in Colorado, and let's ban all oil and gas extraction entirely and production entirely, chances are it would not pass. And so we're trying to do the maximum of what we think is most effective and what we think will pass muster with voters. And so that's basically, we've done a bit of polling here and there to see what sort of language so far works best with folks, and that's guided our decisions. And as I mentioned, we're doing more right now too, to figure out how to best message this, all of this. And so we're trying to look to the voters basically and see what resonates the most. And yeah, does that answer the question?
I think that's perfect. I imagine also, yeah, there's a lot of considerations that go into that. Banning all oil and gas production is a pretty difficult lift in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, I think that definitely answers the question. Well, we're at 8 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So I think we're at the end of our hour. Thanks everyone for attending, and a huge thanks to Micah and Patricia for taking the time to talk with us tonight. That was really wonderful. I think deep dive into what's happening with the Ballot Initiative. We are going to share the recording for this later, as well as links for you to follow Safe and Healthy Colorado and to sign up for their email list and keep up with their updates, as well as the calls to action. Micah dropped all the calls to action again at the end of the chat, and recommend that you guys share that widely with your networks until other folks get involved. This is a really powerful, as Micah and Patricia both said, this is a really powerful way to build power and educate folks about the harms of oil and gas. And it's a really interesting and effective way to, I think, really counter a situation where the political context in Colorado has been reluctant to do anything about these harms. So I'm really excited to see what happens. We're supporting you guys, and we're behind you guys. I know it's going to be a tough battle, and it's going to be a lot of effort going forward, but we love what you're doing, and just want to say thank you for taking time to share this with us and for everything that you're doing out there. So appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone who attended. Thank you for taking time out of your evening to also support this. And we'll see you at the next webinar, and we'll share this around via email. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everybody.